के लिहाज से भी लेबर इंटेंसिव सेक्टर्स पर फोकस करना, और शायद वो कल फोकस बजट में दिखाई दे सकता है। प्रेसिडेंट जी बहुत धन्यवाद। प्रोफेसर चरण सिंह, आपको भी शुक्रिया कहना चाहेंगे इस प्रोग्राम में शामिल होने के लिए। हमेशा की तरह आपसे बात करके बहुत ही अच्छा लगा, और शायद हमारे दर्शकों को भी काफ़ी आसानी हुई होगी इस सर्वे के जो फाइनल पॉइंट्स उसको समझने में। आप दोनों ही मेहमानों को धन्यवाद। एक छोटा सा ब्रेक लेते हैं, लेकिन ब्रेक के उस पार एक एक्सक्लूसिव बातचीत मुख्य आर्थिक सलाहकार भारत सरकार, जिन्होंने खुद ये सर्वे लिखा, वी अनंत नागेश्वरन जी हमारे साथ होंगे। कहीं मत जाइए, आप देख रहे हैं मेरा खास कार्यक्रम आर्थिक सर्वेक्षण 2022-23।
ओ मेहता साहब, किन ख्यालों में खोए हुए हो?
म्यूचुअल फंड के, इक्विटी फंड में एसआईपी तो किया है, पर अभी मार्केट डाउन है। समझ नहीं आ रहा चालू रखूं या बंद कर दूं।
म्यूचुअल फंड्स में रिस्क तो है, इसलिए इसमें उतने ही पैसे डालो जिसे लंबे समय तक रख सको।
बात तो सही है आपकी। चलिए
समझ।
म्यूचुअल फंड निवेश बाजार जोखिमों के अधीन है। योजना से जुड़े सभी दस्तावेजों को ध्यान से पढ़ें।
2022-23 और ये बहुत ही इंपॉर्टेंट दस्तावेज होता है देश की आर्थिक स्थिति को, आर्थिक तस्वीर को हमारे सामने रखने का। और आज ही बजट सत्र की शुरुआत हुई और पहले ही दिन जो अभिभाषण हुआ राष्ट्रपति जी का, उसके बाद ये आर्थिक सर्वेक्षण दोनों ही सदनों में पेश किया। और इस वक्त हमारे साथ जुड़ चुके हैं मुख्य आर्थिक सलाहकार वी अनंत नागेश्वरन, जिसकी अगुवाई में उनकी टीम ने ये बेहतरीन और ज़बरदस्त जो आर्थिक सर्वेक्षण है वो पेश किया है। सर, एक बार मैं आपको बधाई देना चाहता हूं, इसलिए क्योंकि शायद मैं पहला सर्वेक्षण देख रहा हूं जो एक साल के ग्रोथ की बात नहीं करता है, डिकेड के ग्रोथ की बात करता है। और आप प्लीज़ अंग्रेजी में बिल्कुल आप जवाब दीजिए। और G20 के इस बैनर के साथ आप इस कार्यक्रम में शामिल हो रहे हैं, और मुझे याद है कि फाइनेंस ट्रैक की पहली बैठक में भी आपने जो दुनिया की अर्थव्यवस्था है उस पर कुछ कमेंट्स किए थे। सो व्हाट प्रॉम्प्टेड यू टू एक्चुअली write this economic survey in terms of explaining the potential for a decade rather than just 1 year, sir, to start with?
Thank you. That's a very good question, and I'm very happy to be back on the show. We did have a good conversation about the G20 meetings in Bangalore in December, so I remember that. Thank you. It's good to chat with you again. So the reason why we focused on the medium to long term is that in the last few years, there was a focus on pandemic response and recovery and short term when things are going to get back to normal. We wanted to make a statement. Things are back to normal. Let's look ahead to how we are going to grow in the next 5 years, 7 years, 10 years and beyond. So that is the reason we wanted to send out a message that it is no longer about economic recovery from a crisis. It is about economic growth in the medium term. And that is the reason why we took that focus.
But sir, looking at the inflation numbers, why do you think that India has done better in terms of inflation management when other economies are actually facing the 30 year or 40 years high of inflation? Why India has been able to manage to contain the inflation below 8% level and it is sub 6% level, as you have just pointed out?
The first reason is that India did not overstimulate during the pandemic. And I think many of us, including myself, when I was outside the government, we did say that the Indian government should, be fiscally very generous. But actually, I'm very grateful that the Indian government in 2020 did not take that advice. And the Ministry of Finance, the Minister, the Prime Minister, they all decided that rather than be generous, we should be more effective and targeted and support those who needed the most support. And that absence of extreme fiscal stimulus and extreme monetary stimulus, both of which India avoided, was the primary reason why India's inflation did not get out of control. The secondary reason is that during the year 2022, the government took several measures to increase supply and also allowed import duties to come down on critical imports in the primary goods, and then reduced the excise duties on petroleum products and restricted exports of food items for temporary periods. So many such supply measures were taken, and they are mentioned in the survey document as well. So, and of course, we should not leave out RBI. The central bank also, once they decided that they have to withdraw accommodation, they did not hesitate and went about raising interest rates steadily in every one of their monetary policy meetings since April 2022. And that also played a big part in containing second round effects of the commodity price increases and so on. So all these factors, the union government, the central bank, and also our pandemic response, all of them contributed to keeping India's inflation rate within normal ranges, given the kind of extraordinary increase in commodities prices we
Absolutely,
saw
sir.
in 2022.
सर, एक चीज़ जो मुझे दिखाई दे रही है इस सर्वेक्षण में कि आपने केवल एक साल की बात नहीं की, अगले साल के लिए तो आपने एक दायरा दिया 6 to 6.8% का, उसके बाद आप एक डिकेड की बात करते हैं. इन दैट डिकेड यू हैव प्रोजेक्टेड अ ग्रोथ रेट ऑफ 6.5 to 7% against the global average of 6 to 6.5%, and you have well explained the rationale behind that.
Sure.
लेकिन क्या आप कुछ हमें एक दिशा दे सकते हैं कि $7 trillion इकोनॉमी तो आपने बोला कि अगले हम 7 साल में होंगे. How much time it will take India to become a $10 trillion economy, sir?
Look, I mean, these numbers are interesting these number game. And sometimes I do give out these numbers to give people a sense of perspective. But the real truth is, we have to do what we have to do. Numbers will take care of themselves. But, many journalists, whether it is in the print media or television media, they keep asking about these targets. But economic forecasts in general, and I'm never tired of repeating, they are statements based on certain assumptions and conditions, and many of them are external factors beyond our control. So, but there is a certain fascination about these numbers, and therefore I'm happy to provide a certain perspective, but we need to understand the qualifications and limitations of these number games. Okay.
Right,
so
sir.
my sense is that we are going to be a $3.5 trillion economy, $3.5 trillion economy by March 2023. Now, historically, in the last 30 years, in dollar terms, we have grown at an average of 9.1% per annum. If we are going to grow at, let's say, 10% in dollar terms per annum, because let's say the US dollar has peaked, US interest rates may peak in 2024. And if India's economy is growing steadily, it will attract a lot of investor interest. And given our various policy initiatives, such as PLI schemes, PM Gati Shakti, infrastructure creation, leading to better exports, then if the rupee performs well against the dollar, and it is quite likely it will, then our dollar GDP growth may not be 9%, but even higher than that. In that case, if you have a 10% per annum dollar GDP growth, in 7 years' time, $3.5 trillion can double to $7 trillion. And after that, it's a matter of arithmetic, it's a matter of compounding, depending on how the rupee behaves, how the Indian economy grows. Naturally, the same kind of growth rates we expect when you are $3.5 trillion may not continue after you reach $7 trillion. The base is much bigger.
Yes, sir.
So these are all the considerations that will come into play once you reach a particular threshold. And of course, we need to take into account the possibility that we have to do energy transition. We have to reduce our import dependence on petroleum products and diversify into renewable energy. All these things have to come together to make the expectation or aspiration of $7 trillion by 2030 a reality.
Sir, it's a beauty of the economic survey that you and your team has written that the very title actually tells the whole story of the chapter that you have actually written. The State of the Economy Recovery Complete. That's the first chapter. Second chapter is the India's medium-term growth outlook with optimism and hope. Fiscal development, revenue relish, monetary management, a good year, price and inflation, successful tight rope walking. So all the titles are aptly put, and actually it tells the whole story about the chapter. So, but you have also suggested some measures for Amrit Kal for the economy. So what are the reforms that you would like to see in the next maybe a decade that you are talking about, that decade which is considered as India's decade?
No, first of all, thank you very much for commenting on and appreciating the fact that we have a tagline for each chapter that tells a story. And I'm glad that you noticed it. It is an effort we consciously took, and to make it easier for readers to understand where we are going with each chapter. That is one thing. The second, on the Amrit Kal until 2047, I wouldn't call them reforms, I would call them policy priorities. Because many of these things are still already being pursued, except that the focus has to be bigger, sharper, and also mostly with state governments as well. So, for example, we have spoken about affordable, reliable power supply and viable power generation, which means we have to make sure that the prices to end users are reasonable, but not necessarily at the cost of economic viability of power generation companies or distribution companies. We spoke about the importance of education and knowledge and skilling, which is relevant for 21st century challenges. Because information is going to be so easily available, skills have to be developed such a way that we know how to put together and synthesize the information. Elder care, mental health, green economy, these are all issues that are going to be very important, and we need skills, because if artificial intelligence and technology are going to take over even certain white-collar jobs, then there are areas where machines cannot replace humans. And in those areas, we need to equip our youth with the right kind of skills and knowledge to be able to generate income for themselves and their families. I mentioned energy security as well, because climate change, environment, dependence on fossil fuel, because it is a geopolitical commodity, crude oil, that is necessary also to ensure that economic growth does not get affected. And then continued infrastructure creation, both in the private sector and in the public sector. And then last but not the least, I would say we need to work on continuing to dismantle the license inspection compliance ecosystem, simplifying rules, removing outdated laws, and making sure that the trust-based economic model that we have adopted grows in strength and spreads all over the country, that we trust the citizens and the enterprises to do what they need to do, to be law-abiding, and use inspection and regulation by exception rather than as a matter of routine. And then, of course, lastly, again, I would say Nari Shakti is equally important, because we have seen in management roles, in leadership roles, in crisis situations, women tend to take better decisions than men do. And therefore, the government and the private sector must make it easier and possible for women to make their own choices between various responsibilities and roles that they play. These are all the things that are happening. All I'm saying is we need much sharper and continuous focus in these areas to be able to feel that by 2047, India has become a prosperous nation, and the prosperity diffuses to large segments of the society. Back to you.
सर, इस आर्थिक सर्वेक्षण में आपने पास्ट, प्रेजेंट एंड फ्यूचर, ये तीनों ही जो सिचुएशंस हैं उनकी बहुत ही ज़बरदस्त एनालिसिस की है, और मुझे बहुत अच्छा लगा इस चीज़ को भी पढ़ के कि पिछले 8 सालों में जो रिफॉर्म्स हमने किए हैं उसका स्तर, जो उसका असर ईज़ ऑफ लिविंग पे कितना पड़ा। और आपने बड़ी इंटरेस्टिंग एनालिसिस की है रूरल इकॉनमी को लेकर, जिसमें आपने कहा कि 2022 तक 13 लाख से ज़्यादा लोगों को स्किल किया गया, जिसमें से 8 लाख लोगों को नौकरियाँ मिल गई हैं। महिलाओं की हिस्सेदारी जो 20% थी वो बढ़ करके 28% करीब हो गई है। आपने बताया कि पीएम आवास योजना में 2.7 करोड़ घरों को बनाने का लक्ष्य था, 2.1 करोड़ बन चुके हैं। इसी तरह से 11 करोड़ लोगों तक पीने का पानी पहुंचा है। अमृत सरोवर मिशन में हमने 24,000 तालाब बना चुके हैं। तो सौभाग्य योजना में 2.9 करोड़ घरों तक आपने बिजली पहुंचाई है। ये सारे जो डेटा पॉइंट्स है सर, ये बहुत ही क्रेडिबिलिटी देते हैं, और इकोनॉमिक सर्वे को तो शायद सबसे क्रेडिबल टेक्स्ट माना जाता है इंडियन इकोनॉमी को समझने के लिए। अब मेरा सवाल ये है सर कि ये जो आपने एक सोशल नेट की बात की, आपको लगता है कि बजट या फिर आने वाले जो पॉलिसीज़ हैं बोथ एट द सेंटर एज वेल एज द स्टेट लेवल, ये इंक्लूजन को और ईज ऑफ लिविंग को और भी ज़्यादा अगले डिकेड में, अगले 5 सालों में, 10 सालों में और ज़्यादा आगे बढ़ाने का काम करेंगी? क्योंकि आपने ये भी कहा कि रूरल इंडिया में अभी भी मेरे ख्याल से 65% लोग रहते हैं और 47% डिपेंडेंसी एग्रीकल्चर पे है। सॉरी, थोड़ा सवाल बड़ा हो गया सर, सॉरी।
No, first of all, thank you. Yes, we made it responsibility on our part to back up all statements. To back up the statements we make in this survey with as much of data and evidence as possible, and that is why we also placed the chapter on the social sector.
Yes.
Well ahead in the front rather than towards the end, as if it is something that we need to write about but not important. But it is an important thing. And growth, prosperity with inclusive growth is the key feature of the government's policies in the last 8 years. And we wanted to bring it out quite clearly, but with solid evidence. Now, you mentioned about the fact that rural economy is still largely dependent on agriculture, even if the dependency has come down because there is a vibrant non-farm sector. But the good news is that India's agriculture is no longer about just providing food security, which we have achieved. It's now about nutritional security. Whether we take into account things like anemia, stunting, etc., will all be addressed, and also reducing obesity. All these things will be addressed through nutritional security rather than through food security alone, which we have successfully managed. More than that, the agricultural sector is also going to be very important for employment generation by creating value-added products, value-added exports from the farm sector, and also using farm produce. We look at farm sector, we think of rice and wheat alone, but this year is going to be the year of the millet, which is a very healthy product and which is also grown in all weather conditions in the country. And then we should think about edible oils. We should think about horticulture. These are all the areas which have tremendous potential for exports, especially given climate change. Millets can be a sort of a hardy pulse for us to use and consume, and it is also healthy. So India's agricultural sector is not only about food security, it is about nutrition, it is about employment generation, it is about export potential. These three angles we need to explore, and subsequent editions of the surveys will examine these angles in greater detail.
तो सर इसको थोड़ा सा और आगे बढ़ाते हुए आप जो सब्सिडी बर्डन है सर, उस पर हम थोड़ा सा आपकी राय जानना चाह रहे हैं। व्हाट आर योर व्यूज on the farm subsidy portion, the fuel subsidy and the fertilizer subsidy that we are spending, and I think it's a huge money that the government of India is spending on these kind of subsidies rationalization को लेकर के what are the direction that you see in the near future that the government can adopt?
These are complex questions, and it will be somewhat presumptuous on my part to give my views in public. These are questions that have been addressed by many committees, many experts, both inside and outside the government in the past. Subsidies are used by developed countries as well when it comes to the farm sector. And therefore, you cannot say that subsidies are, economically inefficient. Some are necessary, and some of them cannot be measured purely on grounds of economic efficiency alone. Some of them you need for social stability as well, and also for better balance between urban and rural India, etc. So it will be somewhat presumptuous to give a sort of a one-line answer on this question of subsidies.
Absolutely, sir. But coming to the physical and digital infrastructure that you have focused a lot on, why are you so optimistic about the impact of these infrastructure creation on the overall growth performance going forward? You have said that it may add to up to 1% of to the GDP, and we know that the digital economy we are hoping to reach $1 trillion in the days to come. So why it is going to have so much of positive impact in the future ahead, sir?
No, I think the reason is that this digital economy transformation that's happening in the country has already crossed 6 years, and therefore it is.
Yeah, please go ahead, sir.
It is beginning to create. It is beginning to create an impact on the formalization of the economy, on financial inclusion. And therefore, that financial inclusion and formalization created by digital economy is adding 30 to 50 basis points in our estimate, and we need to back it up with some rigorous research, which we are currently undertaking. And also the banking system and financial system cleanup and the corporate profitability and balance sheet strength is going to add another 30 to 50 basis points to go. So these two extra elements are the ones that make me more optimistic to add a 50 to 100 basis point extra to India's average growth in the coming years than the baseline number of 6%.
Finally, sir, my final question to you in this special broadcast, sir, that what are the next sunrise sectors that you see are going to perform in the future, and do you see that it is the manufacturing which are and also the agriculture that you mentioned are going to match the performance of the services sector that we have championed so far in the last decade, maybe?
I think given our country's size and given our current lower middle income status, as we aspire to grow, there are going to be several sectors that will perform well. I mean, you have, we talked about some of the 21st century economy challenges, green economy, renewable energy, contact-based services, services that cannot be affected or impacted by artificial intelligence and technology, and being able to plug ourselves into supply chains and global manufacturing, areas which are vacated by countries like China, etc. These are many areas for growth. It is difficult for me to pick out one sunrise sector because India offers tremendous potential and opportunity in several sectors.
डॉक्टर वी अनंत नागेश्वरन, बहुत धन्यवाद वक्त निकालने के लिए, इस खास चर्चा में शामिल होने के लिए। और मुझे उम्मीद है कि जब मैं पूरा इकोनॉमिक सर्वे पढ़ूंगा तो शायद देयर इज अ लॉट टू लर्न फ्रॉम व्हाट यू हैव रिटन. थैंक यू वेरी मच फॉर दिस फैंटास्टिक पीस ऑफ इंफॉर्मेशन दैट यू हैव पुट बिफोर द वर्ल्ड. थैंक यू वेरी मच सर. तो आर्थिक सर्वेक्षण 2022-23 पर आप ये स्पेशल जो ब्रॉडकास्ट है आप देख रहे थे, खासतौर पर जो अमृतकाल है उसको लेकर के जो कुछ देश की दिशा है उस पर ये आर्थिक सर्वेक्षण क्या कुछ कहता है. और सबसे बड़ी बात ये कि अभी भी हम दुनिया की सबसे तेज रफ्तार अर्थव्यवस्था बने हुए हैं और ये पोटेंशियल और भी ज़्यादा बढ़ने का है. इसमें बहुत ही अच्छी बात यह है कि हम बहुत ज़्यादा ऑप्टिमिस्टिक नहीं दिखते हैं. ये सर्वेक्षण बिल्कुल पारदर्शी दिखाई देता है और बहुत सारे एक्सपर्ट ये कह रहे हैं कि ये बहुत ही रियलिस्टिक है. जब हम ये कहते हैं कि हम 6 से 6.8% की दर से विकास करेंगे तो इसमें कुछ भी बहुत ज़्यादा ऑप्टिमिस्टिक या फिर ओवर ऑप्टिमिस्टिज्म नहीं है और ये एक रियलिस्टिक तस्वीर पेश करता है. इसकी छाया क्या कल कुछ बजट पर दिखाई देगी, वो एक देखने वाली बात होगी. हम लगातार बजट पर यह खास पेशकश आपके लिए लेकर के आते रहेंगे. फिलहाल इस खास प्रोग्राम में सिर्फ इतना ही है. आगे है न्यूज़ नाइट, देखते रहिए डीडी न्यूज़. नमस्कार.
डायरेक्ट प्लान म्यूचुअल फंड स्कीम्स में खुद इन्वेस्ट करने का एक ऑप्शन है. म्यूचुअल फंड्स खुद ही सी, जैसे मैंने फिट रहने के लिए ट्रेनर रखा है. तो दिखता ही है भाई, पर तू तो सेल्फ मेड है भाई. मुझे फिटनेस की नॉलेज है तो आई मेड माय ओन ट्रेनिंग प्रोग्राम. और तेरे ट्रेनर के पैसे भी बच गए. हाँ, सेम विद डायरेक्ट प्लान. यहाँ मेरे कमीशन के पैसे बच गए. सही है.
म्यूचुअल फंड निवेश बाजार जोखिमों के अधीन है. योजना से जुड़े सभी दस्तावेजों को ध्यान से पढ़ें. डिजिटल बैंकिंग का है जमाना, टाइम है बचाना। डिजिटल बैंकिंग है आसान, करो चाहे कोई भुगतान, एनी टाइम एनीवेयर, सेफ है, फास्ट है, हर पेमेंट उंगलियों के सेट है। लेन देन के हैं ऑप्शंस कई, IMPS, NEFT, UPI, 24 घंटे करते हुए काम, पेमेंट आसान और रहो आराम। RBI कहता है जानकार बनिए, सतर्क रहिए।
देख रहे हैं, मैं हूं अशोक किरवा। कोई फैक्ट चेकर नहीं चाहता है कि राज्य मुसलमान आज छवियों सवाल है। आसान नहीं होता सच के लिए लड़ना। जिसकी आवाज कोई नहीं बनेगा, उसकी आवाज हम बने। जो डर जाते हैं वो झूठ से कहां टकराते हैं। जो गरीब के स्कूल में, गरीब के स्वास्थ्य के लिए खर्च होना चाहिए, वो लूट कर इन्होंने अमीर ठेकेदारों को दे दिया। सच को जानना हो तो झूठ पर करना होता है प्रहार, हर बार, बार बार। मैंने आपसे पूछा, मैंने आपने ठीक है नहीं कहा ना आपने।
और कोई मुद्दा नहीं है तो सोनिया गांधी की गुडबुक में मैं अपना नाम गोल्डन अक्षरों में कैसे दाखिल करूं?
इसलिए न फेक न्यूज न झूठ, हमेशा सच के साथ 2-2। देखिए मेरे साथ 2-2, सोमवार से शुक्रवार रात 9 बजे सिर्फ DD न्यूज पर।
G20 नए विचारों की परिकल्पना के लिए और सामूहिक एक्शन को गति देने के लिए एक ग्लोबल प्राइम मूवर की तरह काम करें। वैश्विक विकास महिलाओं की भागीदारी के बिना संभव नहीं है। भारत की G20 अध्यक्षता की थीम वन अर्थ, वन फैमिली, वन फ्यूचर में पूर्ण रूप से समाहित है।
G20 की हर एक खबर देश के अलग अलग शहरों से, हर पल DD न्यूज पर।
नाइट के प्रायोजक हैं वंडर सीमेंट। जब दिल में हो जज्बात तभी होती है एक परफेक्ट शुरुआत।
होगी देश दुनिया की हर जरूरी और महत्वपूर्ण खबर। शुरुआत हेडलाइंस के साथ। संसद में पेश आर्थिक सर्वे में दिखी देश की अर्थव्यवस्था की मजबूती। चालू वित्त वर्ष में GDP में वृद्धि दर 7 तो अगले साल 6 से 6.8% रहने का अनुमान। कोविड से पूरी तरीके से उभरी अर्थव्यवस्था, पहली बार अगले दशक में 6.5 से 7